No, I mean what I was saying
Gurney Slade.
about Gurney Slade. I mean, like that was, you could tell that that was only being made a couple of weeks before it was being broadcast
Yeah.
because he was aware of
Yeah.
how badly it was doing,
Absolutely.
and he was feeding that back in
Yeah.
to the actual program.
There's one of the trailers, if you've seen one of the trailers and the extras, he manages a way to say the word cunt in 1961 on ATV, when he uses the name McClintock or something. It's something he does, which is very, very, very clever and subtle on just one of these trailers. The trailers are even better than the programmes.
I must have missed that, but the trailers are really good.
They're stunning. The only thing that mars it is Bernie Winters.
Yeah, Bernie Winters, that is a bit unfortunate. It's but the rest of it, it's glorious, and it speaks to a kind of an age of television, like when, yeah, I could see the obvious that there had been an influence on The Prisoner.
Yeah.
But I mean, from what I understand of the way that The Prisoner got commissioned, was that Patrick McGowan had gone up to Lou Grade and said, "Look, I've got this idea for a program.
Yeah.
It's about this guy. He's a secret agent.
Yeah.
He's resigned from his job, and then he gets taken away. And he wakes up in this village, and he doesn't really know whether it's his side or the other side. Are they trying to brainwash him? Are they doing this or that? And that's the big mystery." And Lou Grade says, Patrick, I didn't understand a word of that. The money will be on your desk on Monday.
Go and make them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of, this is a absolutely brilliant way of getting genius onto the screen. This couldn't happen today because culture is more supervised. It doesn't have to be.
No.
But people seem to have fallen in line with this is the way that we do things.
Yeah.
He
may have created. I mean, Patrick McGowan is a fascinating character, isn't he? In that sense, that he may have created the way that those ideas and those programs are made, but he also, in a way, signalled the death knell of it, because there's that wonderful story, I'm sure you know, about the George Markstein, the original script editor, who was convinced that Number 6 was John Drake and it was going to be a continuation of Danger Man, which is a sort of wonderful concept in itself. However, that's not the way that McGowan saw it at all. And then taking that series to its conclusion. I always remember the Roy Harper song, McGowan's Blues, from Folk Joke Opus, which is what actually got me into The Prisoner originally. And then my friend and I, we used to have it on video, we used to watch an episode every Monday night, kind of religiously, trying to emulate, because we were too young for the actual original broadcast. And then those last episodes, which are either genius or gibberish,
I tend to err towards the genius side.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, I saw those things for the first time when I was, 13?
Yeah.
And it was a kind of religious experience every Wednesday night or whenever it was.
Yeah.
And that last one, I can remember people in the local newsagents, just working class people, who were debating what the last episode meant.
Yeah.
And to me, a lot of them it was kind of science fiction explanations.
Yeah.
Oh, they were all aliens. There was that rocket that was rubbish.
Yeah.
But for me, it was the moment when he unmasks Number 1. And it's, at first it's a monkey, but then it's Patrick McGowan. And that, to me, said it all perfectly, because the question that he'd been asking throughout the series is kind of, who is the one? Who is the number one that keeps us all prisoner?
Yeah.
And the idea that it's us, I think, is very compelling.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because ultimately, however much we feel we are oppressed by the cultures that govern us, it's us doing the basic jailer
Locking
duty.
the gates,
Yeah. It's sort of because, frankly, how could a small minority of people keep control of a vast swathe of the population without sort of the complicity of that population?
Sure.
That's how any tyranny works.
Absolutely.
It sort of gets you to accept it and to invite it into your life and into your culture.
Yeah.
And I think that there was a kind of a crack in culture in the 60s that, as Leonard Cohen said, allowed a lot of the light to get in. I think that perhaps they have been plastering over that crack for most of the decade since then.
That's interesting. I was often tell people that I think 60s is the last, when you were talking about the 60s just then, that 60s it was the last great decade of, for me, someone my age, early 40s, it was the last great decade of sort of innovation and invention, even if it led to the people such as yourself that then extended that and took that sort of further and those ideas further. To me, we haven't equalled that yet as a culture, as a society, other than individuals.
I mean, I suppose that I tend to shy away from the kind of idolisation of the 60s, while at the same time, I do suffer from a lot of it myself. It was, for me, a fantastic decade. I think the problem is that what's happened with culture since then, and this is not the fault of the 60s, it's not the fault of the 70s, but we as a culture, right from the 1940s, the 1950s with their rocket ship tail fins on all of the cars, the 1960s, the space age 1960s, the moon age daydream, that we hurried through those decades, anxious to get to a kind of an imagined Jetsons future. And then in around about 1990, 1995, we came to a squealing halt because all of a sudden there was that future around us, and we didn't know what to do. So we marked time. We marched on the spot culturally. We repeated the culture of previous decades that we were comfortable with and that we felt we understood. And we just repeated that over and over again, and we're still doing it.
The thing about your body of work is that it's one of the most, if you don't mind me saying so, I'm sure you won't, it's one of the most not only cogent bodies of work, but useful bodies of work. And it seems to me, I mean, a lot of the thrust of this hopeful conversation is the notion of sort of heroes in the pure sense. I spoke to Heathcote just before, and he wanted me to say to you that you're a hero of his.
Well, that is completely mutual.
I'm sure.
I've adored that man for decades.
I'm sure, me too. I remember walking into Henry Pord's bookshop when I was 14, going into the basement and finding a copy of The Immortalist. And the last line of The Immortalist, and if you know it, there are some. It's a television interview with a guy who's 278 years old. The secret of immortality is boiling your shit and all that kind of thing. And the last line is, there are some people alive now who are never going to die. Put that on the news. And I read that when I was 14. Around the same time I was reading V for Vendetta, blah, blah, blah. And I just thought, wow.
Well, I mean, when we did our first magical performance at the Bridewell in London, which was a kind of quite a heady experience. I'd been into magic for about 6 months, and all of a sudden I was on stage pretending to do it, and afterwards I hadn't been able to see the audience at all, apart from the front row. But afterwards I was talking to Melinda and a couple of other people. I think John Coulthard was there, and he said, "Oh, I think that's Heathcote Williams." And I glimpsed Heathcote and was. I didn't get a chance to say hello to him. I've regretted it ever since. So, hello, Heathcote.
We can call him now. We can call him in a minute.
Well, I mean, I was a huge fan of Heathcote's. I mean, through all of his early work, but particularly when the underground magazines seemed to be going the way of the dinosaurs in, say, around about 1973-ish. That Oz was gone. It seemed to, the Mick Farron version of it seemed to be disappearing, and Heathcote with The Fanatic was an absolute lifeline. What was it? The Beast.
The Number of the Beast.
No, there was the animal rights. Was it called The Beast? That was a smaller thing, and I'm sure that Heathcote did that. although my memory these days is shot to shit.
Right.
But
he just called me. Shall we?
Oh,
This seems like the right moment.
it does.
Hi, Hedger. Sorry, you missed your call. I'm with Alan now, and I'm just with Alan Moore now, and we've just been discussing you. So, shall I put you on?
Hi, Hefker. This is
I've got Alan here. Just like to say hello. So.
Hefker. I have always wanted to get the chance to say hello to you, mate. You were, I think, in the audience at the first magic gig that I did at the Bridewell Theatre, and I missed you. You know, but you are a huge hero of mine, Hefker, and sort of. Well, thank you very much for that. You know, I mean, like, I'd probably.
I know you partly disown it.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, sort of, but I mean, your Whale Nation, the elephant piece,
Sacred Elephant, yeah.
the Sacred Elephant. That was stuff that sustained me through some very bleak cultural periods, Hefker.
Oh,
So,
you're very kind.
thank you very much for it, mate.
Well, we mischief makers must stick together.
We certainly must. You know.
Or stick apart in the Discordian tradition.
Let's make it happen, Hedger. Let's make it happen.
Okay.
I'll call you later.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Well, that was a very pleasant interview.
Well, that's good. I'm glad I could get that done for you.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. But yeah, so the dazzle, the spectacle, the music of his language, that would have been an inspiration, obviously, for your own.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, I have always liked people with an Asianic approach. I believe that's the word.
Right.
I believe that there are basically two approaches to writing.
Right.
There is the Attic style of writing, which is all Ernest Hemingway, basically. It's that.
Got to the river was there.
Yeah, that's it. And then there is the Asianic
Yep.
style of writing, which I once heard expressed beautifully by Mike Moorcock.
Right.
There was some attempt to start a new Puritan order of literature, where all of these rules, it sounded a bit dogmatic to me, to be perfectly frank.
Okay.
But they'd, I think, asked Mike Moorcock for an introduction, which he may have supplied, but in it he was saying, look, frankly, this is not for me. He says, I always prefer to be playing with a full orchestra, or if possible, several orchestras. And yeah, I think that kind of approach, I mean, yeah, I loved it in Heathcote's work. Somebody who loves language, who loves structure, who loves all of that stuff, you know, who can't get enough words in there.
Yeah. There's a phrase that I came to know Heathcote as I do now through directing production of his new play, Killing Kit, about the death of Marlowe, which we did in about 3 days, and Keith filmed it at the Cockpit in London. And there's a phrase on the second page, 2-word phrase, they're crimson throats. And I read that phrase, and it was just, you know, that phrase like that reverberates through you, and you think that's in a 2-word phrase, and then the rest of it, and you say the man is undimmed at his age now.
Well, I mean, like the Steve Moore, my late friend, when I was reading through his journals after his death, which was fantastic. It was just an account of the guy's whole life.
Yeah.
But,
the dream journals that he kept.
Well, the dream journals, I read through all of them, and also his daily journals.
Right.
Just his records of what had happened in his life. And I just remember that there was one of them, I think he was going through a particularly bad patch. There were lots and lots of disappointments, minor and major.
Yeah.
And there was just one line where he said, if this keeps up, I shall have to move to Deptford and stab myself in the eye.
Not too far from Shooters Hill.
No, not too far at all.
It's when we were talking about Snow on the phone, you know, and I don't know if you remember, I told you I was in Charlton on an assignment, and I thought, I'm near Shooters Hill. I'll just go, I'll take the bus. And it was only as I got on the bus I realised, because I'd forgotten that he had died. And I thought I was going to go and see Steve Moore, try and see Steve Moore, and then I realised, and then I must have sat and walked up and down Shooters Hill for about an hour, and I said, because I'd read Somnium about a few months before. And it was terribly sort of affecting. I mean, I know you're not a fan of monotheism, and neither am I. But is there a sense? Why did Steve never? His profile was obviously a lot lower. Was that a conscious thing, or he's almost like your artistic father? Is that fair to say? Or?
Well, it's certainly a mentor.
Yeah.
Mentor. I mean, well, he taught me everything.
Yeah.
He got me into comics. He got me into magic. He is in many ways responsible for ruining my life. You know, it's. The thing with Steve, he was, and I don't know how much I believe in this.
Right.
So this is all heavily qualified.
Okay.
But he was a Gemini, which is the equivalent of the Knight or King of Swords in the tarot deck, which I do know something about. Yeah. Like I say, astrology I am not sure about. I've got friends who I respect who swear by it, but I have some doubts.
Right.
But with tarot, which I think I understand a little bit better, I'm on a firmer footing. And so, as a Gemini, Steve was a Knight of Swords. Now, what the Knights of Swords are, that is all of the Knights of all of the suits.
Yeah.
That is the most pristine, ideal form of the energy, which will then pass down through the other court cards.
Right.
There's the gestating energy of the queens. There's the most volatile and perfected energy of the princes. And there is finally the most materially sublimated energy of the princesses.
Right.
But the kings, the knights, that is the most ideal and pristine form of the energy. And one of the reasons why it's ideal and pristine is because it's perhaps not been taken out of the box and played with that much. Right. It's been kept in an ideal form.
Right.
People like Steve, they are idealists. They will not compromise. I am uncompromising in a different way. I will not politically compromise or intellectually compromise myself or emotionally.
Right.
But with Steve, he would not compromise that ideal.
Right.
There was the thing that he wanted to write, and that was it. Right. He didn't care about anything else. He didn't really care about the reaction or the response of the audience. Mm-hmm. It was purely between him and the universe.
Right.
And so there was always that sense that, fine writer though he was, because he almost refused to engage with any sort of audience on any sort of level.
Right.
And that would probably account for why
come through as much as
his work was perhaps underappreciated.
Yeah.
You know, but I've not been up to Shooters Hill for a long time, and I should do. I don't know what. Yeah, all right. I've got a lot of other things to do.
Sure.
But there's also that feeling of wanting to do it, perhaps to break the jinx of that the last time being the last time that I would see the place.
Right. Yes.
Which of course is ridiculous because there's always going to be a last time.
Yeah.
And I find myself haunted by those strangely sedate little closes up around Shooters Hill.
It's very beautiful there. I mean, I feel the same thing in a much smaller way. Just saying to keep it full. My mother died 4 years ago, and she wasn't a typical Yiddish mama by any means. She was like sort of Jewish Joan of Arc, really, but and not very openly emotional. But the connection connection between us was immense, and I'll never get over it. And I'm in that trap now. I live in my mother's house that she left me in Uxbridge, so I'm surrounded by photos of her and mementos and
memories
of that. And I've deliberately kept as much of her because she was pristine style, and it's now half that and half shelves,
your
stacks,
chaos and
all my mess.
Yeah,
you know, and I've kept it.
Yeah,
and people are saying you're in that.
It's a big thing. I mean, a parent dying. I mean, I remember when my mother checked out in '95, and there's all these huge, useless, banal emotions crashing around inside your head, and you've got nothing that you can usefully do with them.
Sure.
And as it happened, we were just preparing for a second magical performance up in Newcastle, which we'd already decided to make. It was going to be something about childhood, and we knew that much. We'd started to do some preparatory work upon it. We'd asked the people up in Newcastle if they could perhaps get us a venue that was perhaps like an old junior school to perform it in, because that, as far as we knew, that would be the most appropriate kind of place. The people looked around and they said, look, we can't find you a school, but we have got this really beautiful old Victorian court building. And we thought, oh, well, it is a lovely building. All right, if it's not appropriate, fair enough. Then my mother died in the midsummer, and while we were looking through her stuff, while we were sorting out all of her effects, we came up with this sheet of blue bandage wrapping that had got horrible stains all over it, bright vivid crimson and a kind of a waxy yellow. And I thought, what the hell is this? And I suddenly remembered that when my grandmother had died and me and my mother had been going through her things, she'd pulled out this identical piece of paper and said, "Ooh, that must be our Jack's birth call." And I thought, this is a birth call. This is the birth call of my Uncle Jack. This feels like it's humming with some kind of ancestral power. And the whole thing about birth calls, that sailors used to prize them for because they were believed to be a prevention against drowning. And that gave a focus to the thing. And I was able to get all of the energies that, like I say, were just rattling around uselessly inside me. I was able to channel all of them into a piece of creation, which felt like the best possible tribute that I could give my mother, and also the best way that I could sort myself out emotionally. It's sort of, I think that's one of the things that art is for. On a personal level, it can be a really good friend, when a useful friend, when you're in a condition that makes help from ordinary people very difficult. You know, there's not a lot that people can do for you.
There's nothing to say.
No, there's nothing to say other than time's a great healer or platitudes like that.
Well, they do say long life to those that remain, but it's, what you thought you would, that's it.
It's all fairly empty and useless if you're in that kind of condition. Whereas turning it all into art is a really healing process, And
it must be very divisive. What works best for you then, the book or the obviously the event was more obviously closer. But
there was only the event to start with. We had no idea of actually realising these things as any kind of comic book. It was only after we'd done the birth call and we'd recorded it as a CD. That was the process then. And I was approached by Eddie, who one of my favourite collaborators, who just said, could he maybe do a comic strip version? And I thought, well, if you can. I hadn't considered it like that, but being Eddie, he found a brilliant way of actually turning those words into a riveting concept experience, which he did with the other one.
Would you say it's your text then? Would you say it's one of your core works, obviously for obvious reasons, but in terms of when you look at the body of the work, if you had to pick?
Yeah, I'd say that there's a lot of them that stand out, but The Birth Call is certainly one of those. It was it's funny, I'm writing about it at the moment. I'm doing a thing for my son-in-law, John Reppion, who's putting together a book called Spirits of Place. He's got Ian Sinclair in there, and it's going to be a good little book, you know. But I think the premise was to write about somewhere that you don't usually write about, and so that rules out kind of London and Northampton and places like that. So I'm going to be doing a piece about Newcastle, which will be talking about going up and performing The Birth Call on my birthday, and then we'll be going on to talk about the deeper kind of investigation of the city that I did when I was up there with Stephen O'Malley from Sun. And Ian Sinclair and a couple of others. This was a few years ago. We were up in Gateshead, and Paul Smith had got us all together to. There was a chance convergence of J.M.W. Turner's Hannibal Crossing the Alps and John Martin's The Destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and they've got these two paintings which have got eerie similarities between them, and they've got them side by side in the gallery, and me doing a kind of a piece about the paintings and about the history of the place. But yeah, I'm about halfway through that at the minute.
Great. Yeah. I mean, there's that we were saying before about the 60s and the people that have come out of that, and how there is so little sustenance today, and keying into this idea of sustainable talent. There's I talked about it when I met Chris Pettit, and we were talking about, is there a kind of super team, a Justice League, it seems to me, that you particularly and your associates, or that bunch of people, Ian and Chris and yourself and I guess Stuart Lee, in terms of comedy and stuff, are some of the only people at the moment who are actually producing stuff which is of use, to go back to that phrase, where we're beyond the stylistic advances of the work or what. I mean, Stuart poleaxed me slightly with the fourth series, with the last episode, with the 10 minutes of the thing at the end. I was with Stuart all the way through till then, and I just thought, right, he wants me to be uncomfortable, that kind of progressive thing. But the notion of, and I said to Chris, is there a sense that there's a kind of, do you feel as part of a team? And obviously Chris is a particularly wry individual.
He certainly is.
He's the poet of detachment, I think Chris is. But do you feel part of that conscious?
What I feel is, in my construction of what's going on, this is something that when me and Steve Moore did the final essay in the as yet unpublished Bumper Book of Magic.
I was going to say, is it going to come out?
It's going to be coming out. Hopefully, it's just Jerusalem is this year.
Sure.
So
that's
next year.
Right.
But the final essay, we kind of give our overview of culture and magic and history, and one of the things that we suggest is that basically all of our culture today is taking place among the dismembered remains of magic. That basically magic is the root of all culture. That you trace anything, whether it's dance or literature or painting or performance, whatever, music, trace it back far enough and you've got some guy with antlers prancing in the firelight. This is the magical origins of all culture. Then when you get urban settlement for the first time, you have got a situation where people they no longer have to grow their own food to survive, so they can specialise. So some of them specialise as priests, which removes magic's spiritual function to a degree. Some of them specialise as those notorious bastards, writers, artists and musicians, which takes away a lot of magic's function as the dispenser of visions.
Right.
Magic has still got quite a bit going for it. There'll be viziers as well, right, that will take away magic's political function, where previously the shaman or wise man would have been advising the tribal leader.
Sure.
But that still leaves magic with all of what could be called natural science,
right,
all medicine, access to the inner world, things like that. This more or less lasts until the Renaissance, when you get science moving into its ascendancy, mm-hmm, and science and medicine are divorced from magic, which only leaves the inner world, which lasts until around 1910, when Sigmund Freud, using concepts that have actually been commonplaces in occult thought for a couple of hundred years, he takes away the last remaining function of magic and just leaves it with a lot of empty theatre. So this would seem to be, culturally, the alchemical process of solve, which is the equivalent of analysis, of taking something apart, taking a watch apart until you've got all the little components laid out and you understand every one of them.
Right.
And then there is the process of coagula,
right,
which is putting them all back together, in an improved or hopefully better understood, form. I think that historically we are perhaps at the point of complete solve, where everything is as
the culture turning to steam.
Everything is as vaporous and dissolved as it can possibly be.
Sure. What's the solution? You mentioned in the Mindscape DVD about 2015 as the year in which the doubling of human information every thousandth of a second has reached. So we're now at that point.
If we are culturally turning to steam, and I don't think that there's been a lot to happen to kind of disprove that hypothesis in the intervening years, then what we need to do now is to begin the process of coagula, which is essentially synthesis.
Right.
If solve is analysis, coagula is synthesis. It means putting it all together again.
Right.
And I mean, like going down to the gigs that I did in London at Christmas until a few years ago with Robin Ince, which were brilliant, fantastic gigs where you'd get a bunch of scientists, a bunch of really smart comedians, and me. I wasn't really sure what my role in things was, but it was interesting to see. You know, as I guess I must be the snake worshipper that it's okay for rationalists to hang out with, something like that.
Acceptable face of the occult.
Yes, something like that. But I get on great with scientists.
Right.
You know, anybody who's not going to be dogmatic.
Right.
I get on anybody who's not going to go religious on me.
Right.
I have problems with religion in the strict sense of bound together in one belief, because that includes yes, creationists. It also includes anti-creationists.
Don't get me started on the Catholics.
Exactly.
Don't get me started on the Jews.
It's all of them, and the scientists. That they are not immune from religious thinking. They have their dogmas.
I have a credo when I teach, and I say this to kids. I'm sort of proud of it in a way, although the parents might not thank me. But I sit there with 6-year-olds and 18-year-olds, and I say, you know, art is about asking questions, science is about answering them, and religion is about avoiding the question altogether. And magic is the glue that obviously clearly binds everything.
Yeah.
The three poles. And I've said that to several people and friends of mine are adults, and they sort of consider it. And I think, well, to me, it's an absolute self-evident. You know, that's what it is. Would you want to be? I mean, talking about the CDs and stuff, and I managed to get after looking for it for years, I managed to get a copy of Snakes and Ladders off the Google for a reasonable price. But the trouble is, with some of them, they are quite rare and they are hard to get and they are not accessible.
I've been wanting to bring them all out again.
I was going to say, would you like to be, because you should be, I'm not sure how you feel about this, would you like to be syllabusized? Because really you should be in every school or in every...
I'm already in quite a lot of
I know, sure you are, but...
It's sort of, if people want. I mean, it's not a big thing for me.
Yeah.
Possibly because of my own ambiguous relationship with the education system.
Right.
It's, I think education's immensely important, and I think it is in the hands of clowns and cannibals.
Yeah.
This is not to disparage teachers,
yeah,
but I'm talking about the structure that they have to do their work in, which is impossible.
Well, let's go through education for so millions of teachers, yeah.
I mean, most of the teachers that I know, and I know quite a few, are either seeking early retirement or are on the window ledge.
Rats and sinking shit is what springs to mind. Can I ask about that? You know that headmaster, the headmaster that expelled you, slandered you at that in your teens. Was he an important figure in terms of your retaliation, your anarchy, your?
Well, I'm not
am I
sure.
Making too much of that? Sorry.
I'm not sure if he was.
Because that's a tremendous thing to have gone through as a youngster, as a 16-year-old.
It's, I suppose you're more resilient when you're a teenager.
Yeah.
At the time, it was playing into Christ knows what mythic narrative that I'd got going on in my head. I'd been doing a lot of acid.
Yeah.
But
you know, this was 1968.
It was 1970 or whenever. You know, I mean, it's. I think that was a incredibly important point in my life. I mean, sort of looking back, I can kind of see why they had to expel me.
Right.
I mean, my daughter happened to find on the internet. She phoned me up and she said, "Dad, there's a picture of you that's come up on." Somebody else had put up their school photograph on the internet, and there's all these people saying, "Is that Alan Moore in the front row?" And I said, "What? Which one's this?" And it turned out to be the picture that had been taken just about 2 weeks before I'd been expelled from school.
Right.
It was my very last school photograph.
Right.
And I said, "They didn't even give me a copy of that one, presumably to add further punishment." I think I had actually paid for it. So, but anyway, we'll let that go. I'm bigger than that.
No, of course you're not. But I was just interested in the sense of, because there's that. Are you conscious of a design to your life and your career? I mean, in terms of from the writing, from starting off with obviously Anonymous and graduating through the Rodent trilogy, through the Maxwell and Roscoe Moscow, and then on to obviously 2008. Well, did you do it incrementally? Were you aware of that?
To a degree, and to a degree not. I wouldn't want to make it sound like I was a mastermind who'd got this all planned out.
Right.
At the same time, a bit of me wasn't surprised when it happened.
Right.
As a kid, I'd known what I wanted to do, which was largely art, writing, something creative, showing off, basically. That sums it up. Yeah, that I like showing off. And when that episode at school, what that was it was a tremendous confirmation in some ways, because I was suddenly, all of the major pathways that I could have taken were all dynamited.
Right.
The headmaster was making sure that I wasn't going to get any kind of further education. He was even writing really bad references when I was trying to get, say, a job at the local tanning yard, which was about the only job that I could possibly get. But what that made me realise was, okay, this is your life now, unless you can do something about it.
Yeah.
You have no other choice but to fall back upon your own resources, because there are no other resources available.
You are the ultimate autodidact, your sphere of knowledge and your sphere of reference. That's why, in a sense, that it's almost a fortuitous thing, obviously as unpleasant as it was at the time. that how you've capitalised on that is a prime. That's what prime example for anybody. That's kind of what I meant about being syllabicised, is that there is a huge lesson and a design, the discovery of magic, obviously at the end of your first marriage, and that conscious decision you made. I remember you said it was coming at the time. So it's fitted this fantastic course that has led you to this point, and that to feed back the notion of being a hero. How does it? I wonder. I'm interested in the mindset, and forgive me, this might be a naive or a stupid question to ask you. How does it feel to be regarded as good as it gets within certainly this field, and obviously beyond that field? Is it something you're conscious of? Or?
I'm obviously conscious of it. It's a thing you have to ignore it,
right,
or you would become a terrible, self-regarding individual.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why I live in Northampton.
Yeah.
Because people here, yes, I do get people smiling at me in the streets and giving me a nod or saying hello, Alan, or sort of stuff like that, and that's nice.
That's nice, yeah.
And occasionally you'll get people coming up. Well, occasionally, a couple of times a day, But here, people are used to me, and they know that I insist upon treating everybody on the same level. And that's the level that I expect to be treated on. And it's something where I make myself accessible to dispel that kind of... that was something it used to get to me when I was going to those early comic conventions, and I would have these shining faces that were kind of beaming up at me, and I thought about Robert Anton Wilson's law of communication, where he says that communication is only possible between equals because everyone lies to the cops. Right. And I thought, right, so this is not working, is it? Right. These people are looking at you like you're some sort of god. Yeah. Withdraw from all of that. Yeah. It's vital, because you don't want to be put on a pedestal, because on a pedestal there is no room to move. They're tiny little things, pedestals. Absolutely. Much better stay down on the ground. And there are huge problems with fame if you let them happen. There was a line, all right, Morrissey, he said some perhaps unfortunate or silly things in later times. Yes, but back in the day, I remember one of his songs, I think it was called Paint a Vulgar Picture. And there's a line in that where he's talking about, I get the sense he's talking about a suicided star, perhaps an Ian Curtis, perhaps somebody like that. And there's a line in it where it says, but you could have said no if you wanted to. You could have just walked away, couldn't you? And I thought, there's no arguing with that. You could have said no. You could have just walked away, but perhaps you didn't want to turn your back upon all of that celebrity. Right. Perhaps it was important to you, and that was what made you take your terminal path. And I would hate for that to happen. No, sure. You can't care about it. I don't accept awards anymore because they're stupid and they hurt too many people. And I think that status is a bit like economics. I think that, as Ruskin put it, if everybody had the same amount of money, there wouldn't be any poor people and there wouldn't be any rich people. So to make somebody rich, you have to make somebody else poor. Yeah. If to make somebody very rich, you have to make potentially thousands of people poor. Right. What if the same is true with status? Yeah. What if everybody had got the same status, there would be no celebrities and there would be no worthless wretches? Yeah. But perhaps to make somebody into a celebrity means giving somebody else a lower self-image in comparison. perhaps to make somebody very, very glorious, gives lots of people a low, disempowered self-image as a result.
Right. So the future, the progression for you now then is to you, because it's an incredible, that's another, the issue with you, is everything about you is interesting, which is a wonderful position to be in. You know, from your biography to the
hairstyle.
For your hairstyle,
yeah.
the messianic look,
yeah,
everything is wonderful. As well as the work itself. But one can get lost in the subterfuge of it, but it is the work which certainly triggered to me, and obviously I talked to you about V a lot, and Heathcote just did, and etc. Okay. Keith's going to go in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
I need to pack up in 5 minutes.
Right, 5 minutes, but hopefully we can. But now you also mentioned on the phone that you're consciously distancing yourself from some of the early work. Is that?
Yeah, that's very, very true. I mean, I have disowned pretty much all of the early work because it's all owned by other people, and since I can't own it, the only active thing that I can do is to disown it.
Right.
I don't have copies of those books in the house.
Right.
I never really want to see the artists again.
Right.
They have all got a lot of pain. I'm very glad that people still get, enjoyment and inspiration from those works because I put a lot of energy into them when I was doing them. It's
and the fact that they were all created at the same time. A lot of them, Marvel Man and blah blah blah, and Captain Britain, all at the same time. Just I remember thinking then, that was the key to sort of loving your work was the sheer rapidity of it, the sheer richness of it.
The thing that I was trying to do in a lot of that stuff was to sneak underground values under the fence, because this was the background that I'd come from. Yes, I'd enjoyed comics as a kid. Yeah. But I'd enjoyed the hell out of the counterculture when it emerged in the 70s. Yeah. And so art slabs, multimedia, this was the essence of what I wanted to do in the world. Comics, yes, it turned out I was very, very good at them. And that was kind of a sidetrack for about 30 years. I'm glad that I did that work.
But that's done now.
But that is done. And there are other things that I would much rather be getting on with.
Which is a nice segue into Jerusalem, isn't it?
It probably is.
I don't know. We're getting in early, so I know you're about to be, in the next few weeks, beset by, a huge amount of interest.